HealingYourself.Life provides information for awareness, educational, and support purposes only and does not diagnose or prescribe treatment for any medical condition. Viewers are encouraged to do their own due diligence and consult with their own medical caregivers before making personal treatment decisions.
Welcome back to HealingYourself.Life. I'm your co-host, Dunnigan Kaiser.
And I'm Melody Kaiser.
We're here again with our off-grid medical doctor, Jane Nielsen, MD, and nutritionist Jack Grogan. Guys, thanks for joining us again here on HealingYourself.Life.
Great to be here. Great to be here. Thank you.
We have a hot topic to discuss tonight. Dr. Nielsen, why don't you kick us off and let people know what we're going to be addressing?
Well, usually I like to start out with what's in the news, but tonight we're doing the news. We had something happen last week that was very interesting in the United States. We dredged up some old basic science and decided that we needed to tell everybody in America that they shouldn't be eating cheeseburgers. And I'm not talking about Ocasio-Cortez. I'm talking about an article that was in the New York Times that dealt with the issue that hamburgers cause heart disease because of TMAO. And
this is what TMAO is.
I'm going to get there. As a matter of fact, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on that. Okay.
Great.
And it's interesting why it's happening now. It's important to keep oriented because our favorite freshman, has been out there telling us no more cheeseburgers. Here, pull on my hoof. Okay. And what she is making an interesting point about is actually two pieces of research, and I want to get them in order.
And we're going to make a point to all of our subscribers that if you've been watching this, a lot of these pages of information go by very quickly. We're going to provide clickable links to as many of these references as we can, and those will be available to our Patreon subscribers. So when you go to patreon.com/healingyourself, you'll be able to sign up at a level that allows clickable links to all of these reference documents.
Great. I actually sent you a link today on doing that, so I didn't know you were already doing that. I watched something today that did that. This is the research that caused all of the malfeasance. And it says gut flora metabolism of phosphatidylcholine promotes cardiovascular disease. But when you get into the body of it, we're taught something that is a new risk factor for heart disease in the opinion of cardiologists from the Cleveland Clinic, that great bastion of misinformation. Okay? Not much accurate cardiological information comes out of that facility, in my opinion. This product is called trimethylamine N-oxide. It actually becomes an N-oxide as it's excreted. And this product is made by your gut flora out of L-carnitine. And L-carnitine is a very positive protein used throughout the body for many, many things. And there is this argument being promoted that if you eat meat and aren't a vegan, you're causing global warming because of the cow fart theory, okay? But the big issue and what they're arguing is it's giving you coronary artery disease. And I'm going to run through the basic science of this and keep it as simple as possible. Then I'm going to turn this over to Jack, okay? They reprinted it because they didn't like the title of it. Same authors, basically, 2 years later, and this time they said that the intestinal microbiota metabolism of L-carnitine, a nutrient in red meat, promotes atherosclerosis, so it was clickbait, okay? The first one wasn't, enough. When we started looking into this, and I decided I had to learn more about it because I couldn't spell TMAO, the thing that I found that I'm going to refer to all night, if you want to get in depth on this, I'm going to send you to another YouTube. I love Joe Rogan. I've talked about Joe Rogan's video on stem cells one time. Great stuff, had the greatest guy in the world. And this one is, here it is, 1175, Dr. Kresser and Dr. Kahn. That's Dr. Kresser, that's Dr. Kahn from the Cleveland Clinic. And of course, for those of you who watch big time fighting and cage fighting, that's Joe Rogan, the famous guy. And so if you just put in YouTube TMAO debate, it comes up first. Pretty simple, okay? And there was lots up there. This is an old discussion. Robert Cranion, the man who really defined the Paleolithic man, his diet, his lifestyle, everything about him, wrote a book one time called The Carnitine Miracle. Okay? And it is a great book and has a lot of good information about why carnitine is key to health. And if we go back through old literature, everybody was real positive about carnitine. I can just keep pulling these articles up. Okay? So when it gets done, this discussion tonight isn't about TMAO. Jack is going to succinctly say the same thing I am, that the basic biochemistry of TMAO is at best flimsy, if not worse than that. And there are some major contradictions to the science Dr. Kahn is presenting from the Cleveland Clinic. But it's bigger than that. This is the distinction between the vegan diet and the Paleolithic diet and everything in between. And the question is, what is the right diet for the human species? And first of all, a lot of people are going to say this, and it's true, one diet does not fit all. Okay? There are some people who really, really don't do extreme low carbohydrates well. They need a little bit of complex carbohydrates or they don't function. That's me. Okay? You give me pure no carbohydrates, and I will lose weight very quickly, and my IQ drops about 30 points. Give me a little bit of complex carbohydrates, and my brain lights up.
Were you pointing at me?
Yeah, okay.
Melody was pointing at me.
Yeah, okay. And so there are a lot of benefits because a pure no carbohydrate diet is in many ways an effective detox. It's very similar to fasting in its overall effect on the body. It has a lot of interesting points that having any carbohydrates is the message that you're not fasting. And so for years, Jack and I have had a book that we have referenced, okay? And that is a very interesting book. This book is Beyond Broccoli, is written as a panel of ex-vegans who all got really sick. And it's a very large book, okay? And I'm going to read a little short thing out of the preface, okay? At one time, I sincerely believed what I wrote about the superiority of eating at least a vegetarian, if not vegan, diet. I have now changed my mind because I know I am healthier, including just a few ounces of meat in my daily diet, especially small fish. I know there are others out there like me who could be healthier if they too would add a little meat to their diet. I have a family member who just about died from a vegan diet. She looked awful, and she got to the point where she would take 1 gram cubes of chicken because she felt guilty and sneak them, and then it was like energy went into her body. And what was really happening was she was stabilizing her biochemistry. And there are a lot of vegans who really feel pretty good because they're going through some form of a dietary change for 18 to 23 months, and then they just fall apart. Their ligaments start to break down. They completely lose all sensation of having good health. They develop skin problems. And Jack and I meet a lot of these people because they've tried that before they've come to us, okay? And then chapter 17 in her book is physiologically not politically correct meat, okay? And this is just for people who really want to see the science of why you can't really feed yourself with the amino acids that come out of beans and soy. It's just not the same. And I'm going to leave that to Jack. When we go back, and Jack will return to this, one of the places where Dr. Kresser took apart Dr. Kahn is he asked a very basic question. If you think that beef is bad for you, and you believe that these TMAOs are so important, the biggest source of TMAOs is fish. Dietary-wise, cauliflower is another one, and mushrooms, pretty funny, okay? And so if that's true, and TMAO really is the issue, then why do we have hundreds of studies showing that fish reverses coronary artery disease and is preventative? And when he laid that question out to Kahn kind of goes blah, 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 and doesn't, he just went off in la la land and didn't have an answer to that. He went off and started talking about Petri dishes, okay? And so this is going to be the basics of where we're going to go tonight, okay? Because these are all old research. Can you cook L-carnitine out of fish? No, okay? Here's an old study showing that carnitine isn't in the vegan diet. Here is vegetarian diet affects oxidative metabolism. We have 20 years of good research on nutrition that has proven at a basic science level that the vegetarian diet is not healthy and that you need protein, okay? There are people, we've gone through and looked at all the foods in the world, doing radioisotope and looked at the amount of carnitine in everything. One of the things I want Jack to address eventually is when you look at the estrogens in the human body, we have 3 estrogens that are really important: estriol, estradiol, and estrone. And estrone is not good. It's just hard to say good things about it, okay? We make it. It's in the synthetic pathway of all estrogens from testosterone, and we all own it. And it definitely is the estrogen you wish you owned less of. It causes cancer. It's very potent. It stimulates tissue in the wrong ways, causes fibroids, a variety of problems. But it exists, okay? And so one of the things you have to accept is that the biochemistry of the human body is that it's making a lot of things that are on their way to being excreted, okay?
Or turning into something else.
The TMAO is very interesting because if you're going to put a toxin in the body, you would like it to have some features, okay? One of the features is that it's water soluble, because water soluble tends to be removed by the kidneys easily, whereas fat soluble tends to get stuck in lipids and be harder to move. And if you're going to look at the ways you're going to excrete a toxin, you don't want to do dermatologic, you don't want to do hair, you don't want to do liver, you want to do renal. Renal just sheds things from the human body very easily and quickly. So what's TMAO?
Renal is the kidney.
Kidney. Thank you, kidney. And so TMAO is rapidly excreted by the kidney, okay? And so what we haven't shown in this TMAO debate, we've done all this talk about the fact that mice have it in their gut flora and Petri dishes do this and that. But what we haven't been able to show is that TMAO is in the blood. All this research is on the TMAO that we excreted. It's all urine levels. It's really interesting, okay? Duh. Gee, I think maybe we missed something pretty critical here in the discussion. This stuff isn't hanging around enough in high enough levels to do anything.
Right, sounds like your body excretes it, and it's not staying in to cause problems.
Anytime that you're going to do research on something and do randomized controlled trials in which you separate people, you want to look for your outliers and make sure that they divide them, okay? Here's a neat little study from 2013 on 513 adults that said adults with a history of major adverse cardiovascular events, an average of 68 years of age, and 69% of whom previously or currently smoke, indicated high levels of TMAO. Why am I blaming the TMAO if you got to smoke to have it? Didn't hear that one mentioned in this debate, okay? There is a genetic polymorphism to TMAO. And one person's going to be really good at assimilating and getting rid of it, and another person is not. And so we're going to have issues like MTHFR and the fact that people have different folic acid and B12 metabolism patterns. You're going to have the same problem here, that you're going to have dual populations. And so if you're going to do research, you're going to have to find that genetic pleomorphism and randomize it into your trial along with your smokers. Okay, and this list is going to get bigger. Okay, and so let me see. If you'd like to learn more about this, I keep telling you, learn to use Google Scholar. Okay, it's a great tool. Type Google Scholar in Google, and Google Scholar comes up, and there's no ads, and nobody's tagging you. And the first thing I did was I put in TMAO. I haven't printed that one, I'm sorry. I put in TMAO and heart disease. Then I put in carnitine and heart disease. Then I put in carnitine and TMAO. And all of those went to all the articles that I just showed you. Okay? And there are hundreds of articles out there on this. And when you read them, most of them are basic biochemistry. They're petri dish information, or they're editorials about theories, but what we're not seeing is randomized controlled trials, and what we're not seeing is anything that's going inside the arterial wall. That is all still completely theoretical. So for everyone out there that cut off all their cheeseburgers over global warming, relax. It's going to be okay. There must be something else going on. Okay? Where Jack is going to keep coming back to is in this fine article on gut microbiota. Okay? And what we're learning, and have known this for a long, long time, is that this is all about whether or not you have dysbiosis. If you've got a healthy gut, and this is what Dr. Kresser kept saying. He said, you can't turn around and take a population of people who are eating French fries and a hamburger and compare them to someone who is eating 3/4 of their diet in rough vegetables that are not overprocessed and 1/4 of their diet in organic, clean protein. Those are two completely different animals, okay? And so we can't do population studies on this. You could never get all of the variables in place. It would be lovely if somebody, hello feds, you can get to work on this tomorrow if you want to, is what we need is a bunch of volunteers to come out as vegans, and a bunch of volunteers to come out as lacto-ovo-vegetarians, and a bunch of volunteers to come out as paleo, rough vegetable nutrition people, and the ovo-lacto people and the paleo good diet people aren't very different. They're pretty much eating the same food, okay? It's about the absence of protein, okay? And so we're not going to see anything out. But look at the things that we've known for years. Again, back to that book, The Carnitine Miracle. Carnitine lowers blood pressure. Then we're going to talk about the risk factors of heart disease. And these vegans are all eating carbs. What is the largest single risk factor for the development of atherosclerosis in the world today? Diabetes. Because of insulin. Because insulin is atherogenic, because it is highly inflammatory. So if you look at vegans, they have an average homocysteine of 15.5. I stole that from Kresser. Okay. And I didn't know that. That's good information. Okay. That's a terrible homocysteine number. Okay. Homocysteine is the inflammatory chemical in the human body because you don't have good folic acid and B12 metabolism. Well, of course that's true. They don't have any folic acid and B12 because it's coming from protein. Okay. And so this whole concept, and you can print these till the cows come home. Everybody agrees. Oh, I missed that. That was great.
I wish we had like a cowbell we could ring.
Yeah, that was great. I can't believe till the cows come home. And that there are so many articles on diabetes and heart disease, that even organizations that, are giving you your official misinformation on diabetes, like the American Diabetic Association that sells diabetic supplies, would agree that, insulin and diabetes causes heart disease. Okay. Then we get into the other mishmash, and this is the Nanobacter model, this is the biofilm model, this is the Campylobacter discussion. Pick whatever you want. There is something going on with bacteria and coronary artery disease. And it's been proven over and over again and ignored over and over again. This is the correlation between dental health. and heart disease. That's all about the microbiology connection, okay? And so I've got just a zillion things we can go through with low carbs and what's the best diet, okay? And, the glycemic index and all of those discussions. But we've been there. There isn't any reason to spend time in that. We all know what we believe. Okay, we've been there. We've talked about this in 3 or 4 of these sessions. The biochemistry of carbohydrates is they're going to raise insulin. And the biochemistry of the vegan diet is that you're artificially taking in all your nutrients because they're not in your food. And as a result, we're being told by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez that we need to get on a vegan diet to save the planet and to save our coronaries. And I'm going, and there are a lot of people out there saying this week because we're not the only people upset about this statement, that we need to very clearly get out of this, I'm a PETA person and I don't want to kill animals, therefore I'm correct in the fact that somehow God's going to take care of me if I eat the wrong diet. That's where we've ended up. And so with that, I'm going to let Jack take over and start.
That's not the only example of wishing will make it so and not reading the owner's manual. In our modern world, it's if we could think our way into a new reality rather than having to subject ourselves to the actual reality.
And the natural law.
Natural law. There's lots of examples of that. And
there's lots of them.
Yep. Yeah, the old saying, you can't outthink your physiology. You can't outwish it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And we've had it for a long time. Now, where I'd like to kind of start with on this, a couple of things. I want to go to meat right away and the whole carnitine debate. Carnitine is only really found in meat products. So actually, carnitine comes from the word carne, which means meat. And it has unique benefits. In fact, even before Robert Crahan's book, there was a doctor, an MD, his name is Stephen D. Felice. He did some of the original research work on carnitine. He was a United States Army doc. And after he got out of the service, he went, I think it was to Hungary, and did research there because it was a lot less expensive. Well, he noted that, and this is based on what we do know, what we knew then and what we still know now, is that for 1/3 of the population, the very first sign that they have coronary artery disease is sudden death. It's about 33%, or maybe it's 30% now. I'm not sure what the most recent statistics are. But what he did say is all those people for a long time before that had what he calls, and what the medical profession calls, silent ischemia. So ischemic heart disease, where the blood vessels are either getting too thin because of plaquing or because of spasm, and so the blood supply to the heart starts to diminish, and that would be called angina. In ischemic heart disease, non-asymptomatic, people have no symptoms of it. So for the classical type would be person that has pain in the chest, maybe pain in the jaw, down the arm, and so on, and they may take nitroglycerin or not, or their nitrates to resolve that, unless they're having a major event. Of course, they go to the emergency room. But there's a good percentage of the population that doesn't have any symptoms at all, and their first symptom is sudden death. That's how they know. Well, he was really interested in that whole phenomena, particularly as it related to carnitine. Because one of the most important things that carnitine does is, in fact, its primary function is to transport fatty acids into the mitochondria so they can be burned for energy. Now, the heart runs on fat. It does not run on sugar. If you've got a heart using glycolytic pathways, you're in trouble.
Except for D-ribose.
Other than ribose, that's correct, which is a very heart healthy 5-carbon sugar. Now, what happens, though, is that, remember, too, fat has 9 calories per gram. Carbohydrate has 4 calories per gram. So you generate more units of energy, more ATP from fat than you do from carbohydrate. And the heart loves fat. Carnitine, and one of the things that happens during periods of ischemia is that the heart can start to shift into a glycolytic pathway. It's very inefficient. and go into a relatively hypoxic state. In other words, oxygen levels start to drop to the tissues. Carnitine prevents that in a stunning way, actually. In fact, D. Felice was very surprised at the magnitude of the prevention. Initially, he gave 1,000 milligrams a day of carnitine. He actually bumped that up later. And he did a series of studies with this. And one of the things that he found was that in people that are having ischemic episodes, if they have a high enough level of carnitine, they stay in that lipolytic, not the glycolytic pathway.
Wow.
So it's as if they're not ischemic at all. They don't lose any cardiac efficiency. Now, in dogs, when they did studies, and they purposely created, it's very hard to get for dogs to develop heart disease, by the way, and what they did is they artificially generated ischemia. Some of them, they actually partially blocked off coronary arteries, and they had a group that got carnitine, a group that did not. The group that got the carnitine was as if they never had an event at all. In fact, it was so powerful that he recommended that everybody over the age of 40 take a gram of carnitine before they go to bed at night, just in case people are having silent ischemic episodes during the night where they're sleeping, because what is it? It's a very high percentage of heart attacks occur between 6 and 9 in the morning. So, and he thinks part of the reason for that, well, there's hormonal reasons and so on, but because of that, you take the carnitine before bed, and it can help to prevent that. Now, I know I'm not supposed to say that a supplement or a nutrient prevents anything, but by God, we can report what D. Felice found, and by God, he found it. In fact, I heard him speak in 1986, actually, and he was amazed at the benefits of it. He wrote a carnitine book. That's the major book for the public that he wrote on carnitine that I'm aware of. And he talked about magnesium and so on. The other real interesting thing about this, when you look at carnitine, and I'm going to cite some of the information here, is that it has overwhelmingly positive effects on cardiac function and cardiac recovery. When they gave carnitine to people with known coronary artery disease and had them go in and do a treadmill test, their EKGs stayed the same as if they didn't have any coronary artery disease at all. So it was really quite remarkable. Now,
you talked about the hormonal event, and Townsend's putting carnitine in his ALC GPC.
Great idea.
Okay, and your product did the same.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What's that about? What's he doing for testosterone repair?
Carnitine, well, a couple things. Number one, and there's different versions of carnitine. What we're talking about now is L-carnitine, but there's...
Rather than propionyl.
Yes, there's propionyl carnitine or glycine propionyl carnitine, GPC for short. There's acetyl L-carnitine, ALC for short. They have slightly different functions, like ALC has a powerful function in the brain. GPC has a powerful cardiovascular, nitric oxide improving functions, but you still all get the carnitine benefit from that. Okay. Now, the straight L-carnitine upregulates androgen receptors.
Oh, okay.
So, and ALC, in fact, Jonathan Wright discovered that in his patients over 60 that had low testosterone levels, about 80% of them could get their testosterone back into a good level by just using the carnitines without any hormone replacement therapy. Wow. Now, in the people that needed hormone replacement therapy, if you add carnitine to that, boy, they really do well. Now, just a few things I do want to mention. The Mayo Clinic did a major study, a meta-analysis on carnitine and heart health. And what they found was that carnitine was associated with a 27% reduction in all-cause mortality. So not just heart disease, but other illnesses as well. A 65% reduction in ventricular arrhythmias. Those are the real dangerous ones. And a 40% reduction in angina symptoms in patients that were experiencing a heart attack. That was the Mayo Clinic meta-analysis on the carnitine data. Now, it has an excellent safety profile. There's a couple other things I do want to mention. Patients taking carnitine had a death rate of just 1.2% in the entire year, where 12.5% of the control patients died. These were patients that already had heart disease. They got treated, by the way, with 4 grams of carnitine a day.
That's a tenfold reduction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep, just carnitine. That was 1,000 milligrams 4 times a day. Okay, 55% of the patients experienced improvement in their standard heart failure classifications. Because remember, if you improve cardiomyocyte function, ejection fraction goes up, efficiency goes up, the left ventricle becomes stronger. That's exactly what we want here. So, and the other thing, remember, since this was not listed here in the papers I have here, but going back to what Dr. Nielsen mentioned a moment ago, the heart has androgen receptors, testosterone receptors. It strengthens the heart. And if you take carnitine, you upregulate those androgen receptors in the cardiac muscle as well. Okay.
I quit taking ALC GPC 3 years ago, and about 2.5 years ago, my PVCs came back.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I got to get back on ALC.
Yeah. Now, this is very interesting. One of the derivatives, the GPC, the propionyl L-carnitine, at a dose of only 500 milligrams 3 times a day. Now, for GPC, that's a relatively low dose. Increased the average time patients could exercise without EKG signs of ischemia by 450%. So people that had ischemia that would show on an EKG, if they took 1.5 grams of glycine propionyl carnitine, that they were able to exercise and improve their exercise tolerance by 450%.
Well, wait a second, but you're also telling me that you could end up with a false negative treadmill test.
Well,
you could have ischemia and not know it. This could screw up a treadmill test.
Yes.
Well, I'm asking that because 3 years ago I did a treadmill on ALC.
Oh.
And passed.
This is glycinyl.
This was ALC GPC 8 grams a day.
So was it the GPC with it was
your
that's
stuff.
a possibility. Here's the thing, though. If you're taking
I don't feel so good about my treadmill.
Oh, no. If you're taking it, though, day in and day out, in fact, that is a legitimate treadmill test.
You're not going to go off it.
Yeah, yeah. And there's the other part I didn't mention here is that there are studies showing that GPC, ALC, and L-carnitine also can reverse atherosclerotic plaquing.
Right.
So if there are plaques, they can be reversed. Now, maybe not 100%, but substantially. Now, one of the most significant things is, especially with the GPC, is the improvement of the activation of nitric oxide synthase. So nitric oxide is a gas. It's a vasodilator. It causes blood vessels to open and dilate. That's why you take nitroglycerin from years ago. The carnitines, particularly the GPC carnitine, does a tremendous job. In fact, even more effective than arginine. Arginine has been kind of the gold standard for that, the amino acid arginine. GPC does it just as well or better. Lots of athletes use GPC and acetylcarnitine. And it doesn't test. It's completely legal, doesn't test, but we do a lot of work with professional athletes, and they do really well when we use those combinations.
So it's also going to prevent ED.
Actually, that's the unspoken part of it. Yes,
yeah, right.
Your
really erectile dysfunction is going to improve on carnitine.
Yep. And if you add it with a PDE5 inhibitor, like Cialis, the benefits are even greater.
Right.
So the one thing is, though, with the GPC, the effects are cumulative. You benefit with that over a period. The longer you take it, the easier it is to get a benefit from it. That's what I said. If you were taking that consistently, that is a true treadmill test. Okay. So carnitine is a fat transporting compound. It's essential for normal heart function. Prevents the progression of heart muscle damage in people with congestive heart failure and improves exercise tolerance. Multiple favorable effects on blood sugar. We didn't mention that earlier. The other thing carnitine does is upregulates insulin receptor sites. So it takes less insulin to transport sugar from the blood to the cell. I do want to spend some time on that. It's effective at improving cardiomyopathy. A recent investigational study examined the levels of TMAO in relationship to microbial metabolism of carnitine in the gut. And again, this comes back to not the carnitine itself, it's the microbiome. And we're going to talk more about that here in just a little bit. One thing I want to go back to on the diabetes aspect of this. People forget that you can have normal levels of glucose and even a normal hemoglobin, glycohemoglobin, and still have insulin that's too high. And that's why, in fact, back in the 70s, cardiologists routinely ran fasting insulins. They don't do it so much anymore. Now it's coming back.
It's not covered by insurance.
That's why. But now it's coming back in vogue again. And fasting insulin is really important because you could have a normal sugar and a fasting insulin that's too high, and you're still at risk for heart failure, for atherosclerosis, for inflammation, because insulin, above and beyond what your body should release to transport sugar from the blood to the cell, is powerfully pro-inflammatory, and it's very hormonally disruptive.
And if you add to that a postprandial insulin level and see a magnificent increase in the postprandial response, that's even worse.
Yeah, that's after eating.
Yeah,
So
right.
if you take
when you jump more than other people, that instability of insulin is even more pro-inflammatory.
There were studies done back in the mid-70s where they did the glucose tolerance tests. And that's where you drink you fast, you drink the glucola drink, and they were done over a 5-hour period. Now, I don't recommend them anymore. It's just too hard on people because most people are sugar sensitive.
Well, I refused to do it.
Good.
In pregnancy
You did
too.
one, though, right?
I did one, and after
Gestational.
that, it was like they told me I was just a gestational diabetes, and I said I refuse to take them. It's too hard on the baby. It's too hard on me.
Yeah, it's way too hard on
I'll just
people.
test my blood.
Okay.
You know, and so yes, it's crazy.
But what they looked at, though, in that study back in the 70s, wasn't just sugar, every hour or so. They looked at insulin, too.
Right.
And they were able to predict with over 90% accuracy who was going to develop type 2 diabetes decades later based on how much insulin not their sugar, how much insulin got released. So if the sugar pattern in a glucose tolerance test is up and stable like it should be, if your insulin is like this, you're in big trouble. And it's the insulin that's holding that in place. So you're a big over-releaser of insulin. That's where the risk factors are. It's kind of interesting if you see some of these ads on TV now. They have all these popular songs to these new diabetes drugs and so on. It's disgusting, actually.
Yes.
But one of the things they talk about, no increased cardiovascular risk. Well, because you can have normal A1C and normal sugar and still have a high cardiovascular risk if that insulin is not kept under control. So the key is at controlling insulin. Now, one of the really great things about the plant berberine lowers sugar and insulin both. The drug metformin lowers sugar and insulin both. So
Ripping B12 out of your body.
well, yeah, but you just take more B12. I mean, that's the
It is still my favorite diabetes drug. It's just I'm disappointed with all the things that are happening to it.
Yeah.
It's not had a good year.
no, but you know why? Because it works too well.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
cheap. In fact, a lot of pharmacies give it away. It's so inexpensive. You can buy a year's worth for $10 or something.
Right.
So, but anyway, that's kind of where the carnitine and meat story goes. Now, keep in mind, if you look back historically at man, as a species, we've had 500 generations of agrarianism. We've had 100,000 generations as hunter-gatherers. We are very well adapted to hunter-gatherer, and that was meat. And it was what you could kill at the time, and you ate what you killed at that time. That was it. With the advent of agrarianism, with the domestication of animals, the formation of cities, then we started to grow food.
Let me expand on that. I want to go back to, I want people to think one time about the hunter-gatherer. The hunter-gatherer was a semi-hibernator. Okay, they were going into the back of a cave and they were turning down their body temperature, slowing down, wrapping themselves up in furs, reducing their fluid intake, and basically slowing everything down and doing everything they could to maintain body fat to get through the winter. Okay, so like the animals, when they came out of the cave in the spring, what did they have to eat? Nothing but animals. When you still had a little snow on the ground, there was no vegetables, there was no fruits, there was no greens. You were 100% meat. And what was it? Lean. Mm-hmm. Because they were hibernating animals and they'd eaten up all their fat. And as this spring turned to summer, green shoots popped up, the animals developed more fat. You move into summer, you start to see non-ripe fruit, you start to see grains, you start to see nuts. You move into fall, you see lots of sugar, you see honey, and you see resplendent grains. So what did they do? They gathered up the grains. They didn't have the ability to jerk meat. They didn't have the ability to express oils. They didn't have containers. They had leather sacks or woven baskets, and they could put carbohydrates in it. And so we ended up with a physiologic response in hunter-gatherers who are type O Northern Europeans. Okay, this doesn't apply to the Spanish. This doesn't apply to the Arabs. This doesn't apply to the Africans. They have a perennial diet. Okay, but the hunter-gatherer had a seasonal diet. So those carbohydrates that we got in the fall gave us a response of a hormone that they don't have, which is insulin. And that insulin made us slow down our metabolism, become lazy, gain abdominal fat, put on weight, and turn down our metabolism and prepare us for hibernation. Insulin is the hibernation molecule. Okay? People don't understand the Paleolithic diet because you haven't genetically changed any from the Paleolithic man. You haven't had any genetic drift in these few generations. Okay? We're still expecting in the spring to be eating lean meat. We're still expecting to see more carbohydrates in the fall. And if we eat them, we're going to hibernate. And so everybody's sitting there in the winter depressed and munching on carbohydrates and wonder why they're gaining weight and they're depressed.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything that you disagree about that, Jack?
No. I mean, but the key is, though, that what we've got now, the type of carbohydrate is so much different.
Oh, sure it is.
And the ratios are so much different. And what's happened is...
Can't beat a good French fry.
Yeah, you can't. Hard to beat it, especially if it's fried in duck fat. Which actually, remember, years ago, McDonald's fries were in lard.
Right.
Much healthier than the vegetable oil that they forced us into. But yeah, I mean, the physiology hasn't changed. But what has changed is receptor sites. And the more of the, even the complex, the simple carbohydrates, the more processed food, the more resistant those receptor sites became to insulin. Partly because insulin getting over-released. Insulin can get over-released in a couple different ways. It can either be too much at one time, it can be too frequent, or it can be both. And these days, we see it as both. And the more insulin you release, the more resistant the cells become. So in other words, it takes more and more insulin to get less glucose into the cell so it can be burned for energy. Well, what does the body do with this sugar that can't get inside the cell? Well, one of the first things it does, if it's not getting glycated first, which more than likely it is, that's why the hemoglobin A1C value is so important. Shows you how much damage sugar is actually doing to the cells of the body.
And that's how sugar damages the tissue directly, is through glycation.
Yeah, it's the oxidation. It's not any different than if you were caramelizing onions in a pan. You first put them in, they're fresh, they have firmness to them. Then as they start to heat, you've got temperature, you've got oxygen, they get mushy, they stick together. That happens internally. We have 98.6 degrees roughly body temperature. We have plenty of oxygen in the blood. And that combination with extra sugar floating around is not a good, it's a recipe for glycation. That damages the cells, because what happens is it gets sticky and it starts to attach to blood vessels, to cardiac cells, to the kidneys, to the skin.
And that's a good segue to the place that I want to move, because I want to go back and address this vegan diet and what's happening in the vegan diet with high carbohydrates and an absence of carnitine, and the difference between animal and vegetable amino acids. And I want to take us over into the rest of that nutrition.
Okay. One of the ways you can tell a vegan, well, if you give them 10 minutes, they'll tell you. But above and beyond that, is that all you have to do is look at them physically. Men have no butts, because when you start to lose body protein, the gluteus muscle in men is the first one to diminish. Interestingly, it also has the greatest number of insulin receptors. The glutes, the maximus and glutes minimus, the muscles in the thighs, they have the greatest number of insulin receptors. So, they say real strength and power comes from the waist down. That's the hips, the butt, the thighs. They're right. That's where real power comes from.
Fast twitch fibers.
And if you look at a really great athlete, they're all very muscular and very firm there, because that's where their power is coming from. Vegans lost that. And they lost that because they don't have the right balance and the amount of amino acids to maintain lean mass, to maintain muscle. The other thing is, even if they're thin, they'll be soft. They'll be flabby. And, some people say, well, that they're in great health because they're thin. Well, there's actually a new categorization of it's called normal weight metabolically obese, that all of their fat is visceral fat, which is the most dangerous type of fat to have. But they have no muscle mass. They have no muscle mass at all. And you see this all the time now. And if you go back to this idea of the difference between a complete protein and an incomplete protein, that's really where all this lies.
That's where it goes.
Now, and I know this is heresy, but it wasn't heresy when I took chemistry and biochemistry, that years ago when we studied proteins, we studied them based on essentially two factors, how you grade them out. One was called biological value, or BV. The other is PER, protein efficiency rating or ratio. And let me just say this, there are no vegetable proteins that are complete proteins. By definition, complete proteins can support life, health, and growth by themselves without needing anything else. Complete proteins are only found in the animal world. God knows, I wish there was a complete vegetarian protein. There is not. There was a book published, actually this is when I was in college, called Diet for a Small Planet,
Yes.
Frances Moore Lappy. Well, if you read that carefully, what she said in her foreword is, theoretically, you should be able to take one vegetable protein, combine it with another vegetable protein,
Exactly.
and have to balance the amino acids that way. Now, I should say the difference between a complete and incomplete protein is the balance and the amount of the 8 or 9 essential amino acids. Vegetarian or incomplete proteins are missing or have lower levels of one or more of those essential amino acids. And the idea was, if you could take beans, which are deficient in one, and combine it with rice, which has that, mix them together, then you would get a complete protein.
And again, the reason it's called essential amino acids is because it's essential that you bring them in from the outside because your body cannot make
Make them, yes. That's a really good point, actually, Donegan, because, and there's some confusion about this, all amino acids are essential. In chemistry, though, essential amino acids mean that you cannot make them from something else. All the non-essential amino acids can be made from the essential amino acids.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you don't need the non-essential.
They're essential.
Doesn't mean, they're essential too. So, but there's confusion about that. So anyway, the complete proteins are complete because they have the right levels and the right balance of all the essential amino acids to support life, health, and growth. That means the protection of lean mass, muscle, bone, connective tissue, organ. It's pretty much what we're made of minus water. That's lean mass. The immune function, immune system cells. Vegetable proteins don't have that. Now, let me go back to how we used to score it. Years ago, and the first one that we learned was PER. And this is very simple. You took 1 gram of a protein, you fed a growing laboratory animal 1 gram of that protein, or per gram, you fed them more than that, and you measured how much lean mass did they gain per every 1 gram of protein fed. Now, to be qualified as a complete protein, and this changed a little bit, the lean mass had to go up 2.5 grams for every 1 gram of that protein consumed. Later it was dropped to 2.5, then 2.25, then it went back up to 2.5. There isn't a single vegetarian protein that comes even near 2.5. To give you an example, the meats are right around 2.7, 2.8. Some of the very highest ones are things like dairy proteins, whey protein. The highest one ever measured had a PER of 4.4, which is off the scale. That's a protein in egg white called vitelline, which is like $1,000 a gram. It's used in research settings only. So, but it's complete protein. It's meats.
Organ meats.
Organ meat, very high in the PER. Right. You can develop a lot of lean mass. In other words, build a lot of muscle from 1 gram of that protein fed. Now, the second way was biological value. This is a little bit different, but essentially it measures how much lean mass that your body is able to generate and how well can it function. I mean, it's not quite technically accurate, but The idea is you're measuring how much nitrogen is, because the thing that differentiates protein from other, like carbohydrates and fats, is that it has nitrogen. Carbohydrates and fats don't have nitrogen. Well, biological value is essentially it's how much of that is being used. Okay, and biological value, to be a complete protein, it has to, and these numbers are similar actually, has to be around 2.8 or higher, somewhere in that ballpark. Whey protein's at 3.5. Some of them go all the way up to 4. The others are like meats and cheeses and so on, eggs, all in that 3.0, 2.8, 2.9 level. There isn't a single vegetarian protein that is even at 1.5. They're very, very low. The highest PER was soy, and that was 1.9. These aren't even close.
Well, and it's soy.
So, but there's a lot of other problems with soy. So the two ways that you learned about the value of protein was the PER or biological value. Either one, and they were a little bit different measurements for telling us pretty much the same thing. All of a sudden, and this happened back 20 years ago or so maybe, there was a donation that got made, to the Department of Agriculture. And it was a large donation actually. And with that donation was stated that, oh, guess what? We have a new way of measuring protein. Now it's the adjusted amino acid score. The highest score that you could get was a 1.0. Every protein that's a 1.0
It's okay.
is a complete protein, like magic.
Kind of
Yes.
same thing we're doing with education and 4.0s.
Yeah.
Now you
Well-
go 5.0.
Well, guess what protein foods have a 1.0? Soy, whey protein, chicken, meat, fish, pea protein, rice protein,
All of them. They all
lentils.
make it.
They all have a 1.0.
They lowered the bar.
They lowered the bar so low that it doesn't mean anything anymore. In fact, if you go back in the literature and I did this actually, try to find comparison of proteins using biological value or PER, it's hard to find them. They're all, if you look for protein quality, everything comes up adjusted amino acid score.
Wow.
So,
For all of you vegans who are feeling bad about the fact that you're not getting your amino acids, you really need to think about adding moringa powder to your diet. Isoleucine, leucine, and histidine. Phenomenal, absolutely a phenomenal vegetable protein source that brings essential amino acids in. It is called the miracle tree, and a level teaspoon of the dried leaves is equal to everything that's in a Centrum vitamin. Plus, it has a variety of amino acids. We put it in are growing it to put in the muffins for our kids at school. I have 300 trees, and you can buy it. It's very affordable.
Dr. Nielsen's referring to his survival compound in Haiti, which supports the health and well-being of potentially hundreds of families.
Yeah.
And we have to do another story on that. It's been a year since we've given
Yeah,
it.
we'll have to go back to it sometime. Well, that's pretty interesting, Jack. That's the thing that I really wanted to get to, is that the other thing we haven't touched on, and this was in Rogan's discussion right at the end. It was, if you'd like to skip to it, it was at 3 hours and 17 minutes. The TMAO discussion is at 2 hours and 30 minutes, and the difference between the vegan diet is at 3 hours and 17 minutes. One of the problems that we have in the vegan diet is that we have so many nutrients that are completely missing and have to be artificially replaced. And artificially replaced nutrients are not identical to biologically available nutrients. And that there are many, many things in that category.
a couple things I want to mention actually on that. There's 2 NFL football players. One's a gentleman named Arian Foster. He was all pro. He was a great running back, played for the Houston Texans. He announced, and this has been quite a few years ago now, maybe 10, that he was going to become a vegan. He was on the front page of Vegetarian Times and so on and so forth. And he had led the league in rushing 2 or 3 years in a row. He was a real stud. 2 years later, he was out of the league, injured.
Right.
Couldn't sustain it. Cam Newton from the Carolina Panthers, he was going to try becoming a vegan. What he noticed was, as soon as he started it, as soon as his protein levels dropped, he got foggy-brained. And he had to be able to make quick decisions as a quarterback. And the second thing that he noticed was his sex drive vanished. So that's all a part of maintaining hormonal balance, activation of testosterone receptors. It's really difficult for people to, without eating quality proteins, to keep their androgen receptors active. So even if you're taking testosterone, if you can't get inside the cell, it's just floating around. It's not really doing you much good. Same is true for the other hormones as well. The other thing that's really I don't think gets enough press on the vegan-based diets is they're loaded with phytoestrogens.
Oh, yeah.
They got so much estrogen in those things. That's part of which interferes with thyroid function. So it increases body fat.
And they're full of goitrogens.
Oh, yeah. I mean, their thyroids
Which
are
are
usually
interfering
ruined.
with thyroid function.
Yep. Their thyroids are ruined. As I said, the biggest thing is no muscle. They have no muscle. But remember, muscle's reflective of organ health too. So there was a study done a few years ago, and this surprised everybody. And what was being looked at was, what is the one factor that's the most strongly associated with not just length of life, longevity, but with health? And it was like 1,200 different parameters that were looked at, similar to the script study that you and I have talked about before. Well, what they found was that the single most important predictor of health and longevity was the amount of lean mass a person had, how much muscle they have. Nobody expected that. Now, it didn't matter what age you were. What they found was that, and it was from all causes. So if you were injured, the more muscle you had, the quicker you bounced back. If you had to have surgery, the more muscle you had, the quicker you recovered. If you had a cold or flu, the more muscle you had, the stronger your immune system was. And this all has to do with essentially how much active proteins do you have in your body now. And muscle is a direct reflector of that.
And what does chronic alcohol use do to the human body? Reduces lean muscle mass.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And by several different
Alcoholics
mechanisms.
never have a butt.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. I hate to say it this way, and I'm not trying to make fun of anyone, but the other day I was over at a shopping center, and I saw this guy walk by along with his wife or girlfriend, and it was just like a hormonal observation. He had no butt and a big beer gut. She had very heavy in the back end, heavy legs, big thick arms. And he was thin as a rail except for this. And I looked at that and I thought, that is classical androgen imbalance. He's got no testosterone. She's got way too much estrogen.
Way too much estrogen.
And the thing is, though, when you look at that, and they were young. They were maybe in their 20s or so. These are the same people that 5 years, 10 years down the road are going to have some real issues. I mean, I'm sure, Dr. Nielsen, that you can talk about this a little bit, but aren't you seeing younger and younger people with worse and worse illnesses?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
but I have so many variables in that. When you add the 40 million undiagnosed cases of Lyme and layer that over everything, I'm having a hard time sorting them out of everything. And then you take the complete deconditioning of the people whose only exercise is thumb, and you've got that whole variable. And then you've got the millennials split into two groups. You've got one group of millennials who are really pretty educated on nutrition and they're eating very well. And then you have another half of the millennials that probably have the worst diet we've seen in history. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they look awful. These kids are coming in and they're 50, 60 pounds overweight, 22 years old, and have absolutely no muscle mass at all. They're just fat and skeletal. It's just hard to look at. So you guys got any questions for us?
If a cow asks you to pull its hoof, do you do it?
Here, pull my hoof.
No, very educational. That was quite something.
It's a
So
whirlwind
thank you.
tour of red meat, TMAO, carnitine, insulin, high insulin. There's so many topics in there.
And low quality protein.
And low quality protein.
Well, L-carnitine seems to be the key
protector.
to me.
If people want
protect
to,
against
if people,
so many things.
yeah, if people want to find out more about perhaps the type and quantity of L-carnitine that they might want to consider adding to their diet, where's a place that they can go to learn more?
Even Steve Felice's book is very good. The Carnitine Miracle that Dr. Nielsen mentioned earlier was great. You could look at acetyl L-carnitine, the GPC, it's glycine propionyl carnitine.
Now, did you say, Dr. Nielsen, people could call you and get it from you, and you could ship it?
We're actually, yes. We had a product that combined those. We had some problems with it in terms of manufacturing, getting it so it would last for a period of time without going bad.
The inherent problem of a protein.
Yeah.
Go ahead, dehydrate a protein and keep it stable.
Yeah, well, and carnitine absorbs moisture easily. So we're coming back out with it. I'd like to be able to tell you it's next week, but it won't be. They can just, call Dr. Nielsen's office or call my office. It will be available again. In fact, it's in product development right now. So I'm hoping by the end of the summer, hopefully we'll have it back
Good,
again.
my PVCs will go away again.
We'll put the contact information once again, as we have in the past, in the description of this video for anybody who wants to reach out to you guys. We've been speaking with Jay Nielsen, MD, and Jack Grogan, nutritionist, on several topics here about Paleolithic diet and heart health. And thank you guys for joining us here on HealingYourself.Life.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
As always, I learned a lot.
As did I.
Hey, HealingYourself.Life viewers.
We need your help in enabling us to continue to create great health videos for you.
So please support our mission by going to patreon.com/healingyourself and pledging any monthly amount you can.
Your pledge will also help us to afford a new Lyme peptide treatment therapy to improve our memory, and we will report on our progress to benefit you and others.
So remember, go to patreon.com/healingyourself and pledge today.
Were you going to tell them to go to patreon.com/healingyourself to pledge to help our memory treatment?
I thought I did. I'll do it. So please go to patreon.com/healingyourself and pledge today.
Thanks.
They say the stock market crashed today.
Yeah, I heard that.
Sounds like people's retirement accounts and savings accounts are going to get bailed into the banks.
Yeah.
Looks like pension plans and Social Security are going to get suspended too.
I know.
Sure, I'm glad we decided to put our money into gold and silver instead.
Me too.
Get your first ounce of silver at spot price and free shipping on any order over $99 at sdbullion.com/rp. Hey, Reluctant Preppers. If you haven't heard, we've already started our monthly 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle thank you gift to one active Patreon subscriber each month, signed by your host, Dunnigan Kaiser. And you don't want to miss out on that.
Please help us grow by subscribing today at patreon.com/reluctantpreppers.